Like I said before, there are a lot of use cases for a while loop. What I'm doing right now is I'm just showing you different ones. Those are the ones that I will probably ask you about on an exam. But, you know, the more while loops you write, the more you're going to get used to it. But I'm just giving you basically the basic ideas of what while loops are used for. Let's say that I'm going to ask you to add the numbers from 1 to 10. Okay. Let's actually make it a little smaller. Let's change it to be 5. This is a really small eraser. I need to make it a little bigger. But for now, that's okay. So 5. Okay. Now, if I ask you to add the numbers from 1 to 5, you can't just, you know, do it all in one step in your head. What you basically have to do is say, well, the first number is 1. So this is the number that I'm going to be adding. When I add 1, my sum is going to be 1. So you tell me 1, now I have 1. When you tell me, when I see the 2, I'm going to say, okay, now 1 plus 2 is 3. So now my sum is 3. When I start adding 3, I say, okay, well, I've added 3 so far. So now 3 plus 3 is 6. And when I come to add the 4, I say, okay, well, what I've added so far is 6. So now 6 plus this 4 is 10. And then when you give me the 5 to add, I say, okay, so far I've added, the total is 10. So I'm going to say 10 plus this 5 that I'm adding is 15. So now I can say that the sum from 1 to 5 is 15. I can't do it in one step. You know, 2 numbers I can do in one step in my head. 7 plus 8, 15. But when you're given a series of numbers to add, you can't do it in one step. What you're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm going to start by having a sum in my mind that is 0. So I'm going to start a variable sum that is 0. And then I have a variable that I'm adding. And this variable that I'm adding is starting with 1. So this is kind of my initialization. Okay, this is initialization. This is my starting point. I'm starting out with saying I haven't seen anything, so I don't have anything, no sum in my mind. And the first number I want to add is 1. Okay, now when do you want to stop adding? Well, I want to stop adding when this number reaches 5. So as long as this number is less than or equal to 5, I'm going to add. Okay. Now, when you're adding, after I add 1, the next number I want to add is 2. So I'm going to say num plus plus. So when I finish 1, I'm going to do 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. But what is it that, what's the main goal of this loop? It's not printing. So I'm not going to have a system.out.print a line like I did with the other 2 examples that we did. What is the purpose of this loop? The purpose of this loop is to figure out what the sum is. So the purpose of this loop is to update that variable sum. So by the end of the loop, it gives me that 15. So now the question is, how am I going to update sum? If sum was 0 at the beginning, when I see the number 1, what am I going to do to sum? I'm going to add to it the 1. And then when I saw, after I added it to it the 1 and it became a 1, and then I saw the 2, what did I do? Well, what I did was I added to the sum the 2, and that made it 3. And then when it was 3, what did I do to it when I saw the 3? Well, what I did was I took the sum and I added to it the number, made it 6. And then I took the sum and added to it the number 4. So what I'm doing is I'm updating the sum by adding to it the number. And so if I was to write this code, it will actually produce for me the sum at the end. So let's look at the slide to see what it's doing. So here, what we have is 2 variables that we're initializing. The variable that's changing, count or num, like I had, it's starting with 1, it's going up to 5, 8 increments of 1. And then I have another variable. We call that variable the accumulator. That's the variable that I need to eventually at the end display the sum of. So this line, this at the end of this loop, what I want to do, my main goal is to say I found the sum. Sum is, and then, you know, print it out. So this is the main purpose of this loop, to eventually print out that sum. And so my goal then inside the loop would be to make sure that I update that sum so that after the loop I would have it. Let's write this code together in NetBeans and try it out ourselves. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment out this code so it doesn't keep running when we execute. So here what I want to do is I want to add the numbers 1 to 5. So we're going to say, okay, we're starting. What's the first number I want to add? 1. That's the first number I want to add. Okay, when do I want to stop? I want to stop when I reach 5. So as long as the num is less than or equal to 5, I'm going to continue. Okay, so this is the test. When do I want to stop? Here what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the update variable first. So after I add num, what's the next one I want to add? I want to add the next one. So after 1, I want to add 2. So here my update is add 1. So it's going to be num plus plus. Now the main reason we're writing this code is to update the sum variable. So we need a sum variable, an accumulator. So we're going to go back and create a sum variable. At the beginning, I have nothing in my mind, nothing added, so the sum is 0. Nothing added yet. And so after I see num, update the sum. So after I see num, I want to add it to sum in my mind already. So I'm going to go to sum. I'm going to say sum, add to yourself the number that we just saw. This is the same again as saying sum equal to sum plus num. And so if we run this, and let's print it out, the sum first at the end, so we see it, we should get that it is 15, like we did the calculation ourselves. Okay, now if I wanted to make it 1 to 10 instead, I would just change the ending to stop when it reaches 10 instead of 5. And so the sum from 1 to 10 is 55. Okay, so this is how I can use a while loop to write code that adds a bunch of numbers. Now, let's say I told you I want you to multiply the numbers from 1 to 10. What would change here? You know, maybe the name of the variable, instead of sum, it would be product. But what else would change? The plus would become a multiplication. The other thing that would have to change is that this variable would have to be set to 1 instead of 0. Let's actually type this code up ourselves so that we make sure that it's right. Here, what we want to do is we want to multiply. So now we're going to say multiply. And let's go back to 5 so we can verify it ourselves. Okay. So we're going to start off with 1. Okay. So this is to multiply. Now here, we're going to say int product instead. And because we're multiplying, we don't want to start with 0. If you multiply anything with 0, you're going to get a 0. So we want to change this to 1. Okay. And then we're going to say we're going to go up to 5. And then we want to update the variable, the product. So now it's going to be product times equal num. And let's just do here let's do 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 to figure out what it's going to be. So here we have 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 20 is 120. So we should get 120 if we do this right. And at the end, we are going to update num and we're going to display product. We don't want to display sum here. So let's see, are we going to get the 120? We're going to get the 120. So if you wanted to multiply, just remember that you need to initialize your accumulator, that variable that's accumulating the value step by step. You switch it and you start it off with a 1. Okay, so this is the sample code for adding a range of values, and you could also do like multiplication also.